Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachah, Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Ezekiel, the 22nd chapter. Okay, as you can see in the headline, the sins of Israel. And in this chapter, it's a continuation of the Lord speaking to Ezekiel concerning the iniquity of Jerusalem. And you can start to see now that the Lord was truly upset, but at the same time, he was fully justified in the judgment that he brought both back then and what he's going to do in this time, right? Because he's basically laid out, their track record of iniquity that they've been doing, okay, to show that, hey, when I brought this judgment, it wasn't because, I was just being unrighteous or I wasn't being fair, but look at the things that they're doing. So this is the book of Ezekiel chapter 22, verse 1. Moreover, the word of the Lord Yahweh came unto me, saying, Now, thou son of man, wilt thou judge? Wilt thou judge the bloody city? Yea, thou shalt shew her all her abominations. And this bloody city here, dealing with Jerusalem. And you're going to find out why the Lord referred to it as such. Verse 3, Then say thou, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, The city sheddeth blood in the midst of it, that her time may come, and maketh idols against herself to defile herself. And that's because, and also as we're reading through this, you're going to actually start to, see a lot of similarities between what the Lord is mentioning in here and what Jake or the Israelites are doing today. You're going to start to see a lot of similarities because it was the same people doing the same iniquity and wickedness back then, just in a different time period. Okay, but the kinds of wicked acts that the Lord is going to mention in this chapter, that's the same thing that Jake does today, which is another indicator to show you who they are. Anyway, as it says, they shed blood, right? Forms of murder, unrighteous dealings, sacrifice in the midst of it, meaning in the midst of the land, right? That her time may come, because eventually what was going to happen, with all this iniquity piling up, the Lord was going to bring judgment. Judgment was going to draw near unto them. And maketh idols against herself to defile herself. So pretty much everywhere you turned, you would see some form of idol worship. And it wasn't necessarily that they all served the same idol. They had different gods that they would worship. Thou art become guilty in thy blood that thou hast shed, and hast defiled thyself in thine idols which thou hast made. And thou hast caused thy days to draw near, and art come even unto thy years, meaning unto the time of your end. Therefore have I made thee a reproach unto the heathen, and a mocking to all countries. So the Lord is saying here that because of the guilt of the blood that you've shed, of the way you've defiled yourself by worshiping these different idols, okay, you've caused your end to draw near. And I'm going to make you a reproach unto the heathen by the destruction that I'm going to bring onto you, to where they're going to look down, they're going to, talk all that ish against you and mock you because of the condition I'm going to put you in. All right. And just like that, like today, for example, there are a lot of cases of Israelites killing one another, so-called blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans, be it somebody being stabbed or being shot. Most cases is by guns, right? In the ancient world, they didn't have guns, but they had other means. Okay. Aggravated assault, the X, Y, and Z. On the physical sense, gang violence, all of these things. But also on the flip side, you had the idolatry, which today, what that would look like is how it is that you go into a Jake neighborhood. You have some Israelites that are Muslims, some Israelites that are practicing, following Christianity. Some Israelites that are just, they're doing all sorts of things, worshiping all sorts of different religions. Now, today, you have these main known religions, right? Like, people follow Jesus Christ and all of that, right? Which, when you read the scriptures, that wasn't even the name of the Messiah. All right, but the point is, they followed these different religions. Guess what? Back then, during the ancient world, the equivalent was that of Baal and Molech and Ashtoreth, and Tammuz. That's like today you have an Israelites being, Catholics and Muslims and so on and so forth, following these other practices. They were doing that back then, and back then more explicit with their idols that they would bow down to and serve. So the Lord is saying, because of that, I'm going to make you a reproach unto the heathen. It says, those that be near and those that be far from thee shall mock thee, which art infamous and much vexed, because they're going to see the destruction that's going to come upon Jerusalem, and that's going to give them a cause to be reproachful. Verse 6, behold, the princes of Israel, every one were in thee to their power to shed blood. So all the princes are really the rulers, like those that are in the high positions. They all they were all in there partaking in this, because they had the power to. They could put who they want to death, and there wasn't any righteous judgment that was going forth. In thee have they set light by father and mother. In the midst of thee have they dealt by oppression with the stranger. In thee have they vexed the fatherless and the widow. Now, to set light by father and mother, meaning to treat them with contempt, to disregard them. You're taking them lightly. When the scriptures tell you that you are to honor your mother and father, or your father and mother. It says, in the midst of thee have they dealt by oppression with the stranger, being the foreigner that comes into the land, one that wasn't born in the land per se. Okay, but they oppress them, treat them unrighteously, try to take advantage of them, which is wrong. In thee have they vexed the fatherless and the widow, because according to the scriptures, according to the laws, there were certain things that actually needed to be done by the society, by the community, that would help to take care of the fatherless, right? Those that were without, a father, maybe like orphans, right? And those that were widows, that had lost their husbands and probably didn't have much of a family to go back to that could support them. So they were out there by themselves. Might end up becoming a harlot just so she can provide. But the point is, they were vexed because in a society that doesn't, implement the laws and the scriptures, one that comes to mind is the scriptures tell you when you harvest, you're not supposed to gather and take every single, resource off of your land. Indicates that when those that are the fatherless and the widow come in, they can have something to eat. I believe there's also another law that says, I think either the former or during the former or the latter reign, at some point in there, you were to bring a certain amount of your crops to the gates, where they would be distributed among the Levites and the widows and so on and so forth as well. But do you think that they were honoring that in this society? No. So they vexed the fatherless and the widow. Thou hast despised mine holy things and has profaned my Sabbaths. Yeah, the things that the Lord gave us, the ordinances, the statutes, the commandments, the ways, the customs that would make us separate and holy, they despised those and profaned my Sabbaths. They weren't honoring the Lord, the Sabbath of the Lord. So much so, when you read in the book of Nehemiah, that's why Nehemiah had to do what he had to do, because they were profaning the Sabbath. You had merchants that would come in on the Sabbath day, they would open the gates and they would buy and sell. And he basically had to put a stop to that. Now that was much later than this, but it was continuing the same custom, the same practices that Jake were doing, all the way even up until this time. In thee are men that carry tales to shed blood, meaning they bear false witness. They tell lies to get people put to death. And this was all happening in Jerusalem. Guess what? These things are happening today in the modern day sense. And when it says men, it's not just actual males. You have women that were doing this too, and they do that today. Tell a lie on somebody, get them affiliated in something that they have no business in, and then they get put to death. And indeed, they eat upon the mountains, which represents their idol worship. Okay, because they would go and sacrifice upon the mountains, and also eat in the name of their gods. In the midst of thee, they commit lewdness, so all forms of perverse acts. In thee have they discovered their father's nakedness, i.e. to sleep with their father's wives. Right? When you discover their nakedness, that's what it means here. Okay. In thee have they humbled her that was set apart for pollution, i.e. a menstruous woman. Today they call it period sex. Okay. This is what they were doing. And the Lord was beholding all of this going on in the land. How upset do you think that made him? And one hath committed abomination with his neighbor's wife, i.e. he has committed adultery with his neighbor's wife. And another hath lewdly defiled his daughter-in-law, so he's popping his son's wife. And another in thee hath humbled his sister, like this guy. What was his name? Was it the brother of Absalom? Was it who his sister was it? Let me see. Amnon, David's son. Yeah, Amnon. I think he's the one who ended up forcefully laying with his sister. Well, yeah, his sister, but it was really the sister of Tamar. There we go. Yep. So although he was the heir apparent to David's throne, Amnon is best remembered for the rape of his half-sister Tamar, daughter of David and Maacah. And you can read more about that in the book of Samuel. Okay. But basically, right, like even going back then, all the way back then. So this wasn't something that's like, that was unheard of. Okay, but at this time, this was something that was prevalent, happening in the land. Okay, it says another indeed hath humbled his sister, his father's daughter. So in this case, it wasn't even his half sister, straight up his sister. Wow, that's crazy. But that's there was a post that was put up. This was a while back, either this year or last year. You basically had this woman. Obviously, she was Jake, a black woman. And she was talking about how, oh man, it's so sickening to even recall this. She was saying how, her son, when he grows up, he ain't gonna be dealing with these other women, but he gonna be dealing with her. Meaning that at that when he gets to that age of 12 or whatever, she's gonna start giving it up to him. That's the type of shit that you hear from these people's mouths, and they're so far gone and perverse that they'll actually do that. Okay? So guess what? They were doing the same things back then. They're doing the same things today. That's why when you hear some of these crazy ass things that be coming out, like, this person did this, or this person got caught doing this, it's just like, they did it back then. It's the same people. Okay? Verse 12, and thee have they taken gifts to shed blood. They pay somebody off, he goes and does the act like a hitman. Whether the guy is innocent, whether the guy did it or not, as long as he got what he wanted, he does the job. Thou hast taken usury and increase, and thou hast greedily gained of thy neighbors by extortion. There's a law that says you're not supposed to charge interest upon a fellow Israelite. They didn't regard that. And has forgotten me, saith the Lord Yahweh. Yeah, because all these things they were doing, they weren't keeping the Lord in mind. If they were, they would have thought twice and said, hey, the Lord said we shouldn't do these things. And these are the exact things that we're doing. Behold, therefore, I have smitten mine hand at thy dishonest gain, which thou hast made, and at thy blood, which hath been in the midst of thee. Can thine heart endure? Or can thine hands be strong in the days that I shall deal with thee? Meaning, what I'm about to bring upon you, can you handle that? It's rhetorical. I, the Lord Yahweh, have spoken it and will do it. And I will scatter thee among the heathen and disperse thee in the countries, and will consume thy filthiness out of thee, which the Lord did then and even now. Okay? Through captivity, through fleeing, through all these means over a period of time, you had Jake that was scattered. And that was according to the curse in Deuteronomy, the 25th chapter. And thou shalt take thine inheritance in thyself in the sight of the heathen, and thou shalt know that I am the Lord Yahweh. Now, when it says here, thou shalt take thine inheritance in thyself, when you actually look into that, the Hebrew word over there, it means you're going to be reproachful. Okay? Let me actually go back there. Yeah, halal. Here it says a profaned, right? Polluted, desecrated, unclean, violate, treat as common. Okay, so here when it says that, where we at? Thou shalt take thine inheritance in thyself in the sight of the heathen, meaning you're going to be polluted and profaned in the sight of the heathen. They're going to see it. And thou shalt know that I am the Lord. And the word of the Lord came on to me, saying, Son of man, the house of Israel is to me become dross. Dross is the impurities, okay, of like certain, metals and so on and so forth, the unwanted parts. So the Lord is saying, you've become like that to me. Instead of that gold and that silver and that rich part, no, you've become the part that I want to get off of the gold, the dirty part. All they are brass and tin and iron and lead in the midst of the furnace. They are even the dross of silver, because that's how you would get it off, by fire. And when they say you purify the gold or you purify the silver, how is it becoming more pure? The fire is melting away the impurities. That's the dross. Therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, because ye are all become dross, behold, therefore I will gather you into the midst of Jerusalem, as they gather silver and brass and iron and lead and tin into the midst of the furnace, to blow the fire upon it, to melt it. So will I gather you in mine anger and in my fury, and I will leave you there and melt you. Now, here, what the Lord is telling Ezekiel, right, the reason he's saying I'll gather you into the midst of Jerusalem, meaning back then, what the Lord was, the reference the Lord was making here is that he was going to bring judgment upon them in the land of Jerusalem, right? And that the analogy of them being in the midst of the fire, and being left there, meaning that they weren't going to be able to escape the judgment that was going to come upon them. Of course, in that time, it was by way of the siege of Babylon. The Babylonians coming up in there, burning things up, the Edomites joining them and helping them. But this is also applied prophetically now. And in the prophetic sense, when the Lord says he was going to gather us into the midst of Jerusalem, it doesn't mean the actual land per se. Okay, in the sense of prophecy, where the Lord is really going to gather the wicked Israelites that are going to be burnt is going to be in America. Okay, and that's why it says here that he's going to gather you, blow the fire upon you, right, in his anger, and leave you there and melt you. And that's going to happen by way of thermonuclear missiles, meaning that the whole situation you got going on, in the east over there, eventually is going to spark into a third world war, a nuclear third world war. Okay, and one of the primary places that is going to be destroyed in that war is America by hundreds of missiles, and that's going to cause a great, lake of fire over here. So guess what? Those wicked Israelites that find themselves here, they're going to be melted, and the Lord said he's going to leave you here. He's not going to deliver you. He's going to leave you here and melt you. Okay, so in a prophetic sense, that's what it's going into, that future judgment. Okay, but dealing more, like I said, like I've mentioned before, dealing with the context of of what happened in the ancient time with Ezekiel, what the Lord was saying here is, I'm going to bring that judgment upon you, and I'm going to liken it onto you being in the midst of a fiery furnace that you're not going to escape. Verse 21, yea, I will gather you and blow upon you in the fire of my wrath. See, in this case, like going back to the analogy, he's likening his wrath onto that fire. And ye shall be melted in the midst thereof. As silver is melted in the midst of the furnace, so shall ye be melted in the midst thereof. And ye shall know that I, the Lord Yahweh, have poured out my fury upon you. So when that judgment comes upon you, you're going to know and acknowledge that, yeah, this is the wrath of the Heavenly Father because of the wickedness that we've done. And the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, say unto her, Thou art the land that is not cleansed, nor rained upon in the day of indignation. Her being Jerusalem, right? Meaning that you're going to be like a land that is polluted without rain, barren. There is a conspiracy of her prophets in the midst thereof, like a roaring lion ravening the prey. They have devoured souls. They have taken the treasure and precious things. They have made her many widows in the midst thereof. Meaning, you had these false prophets that would conspire with one another to take advantage of the people. That's why it likens them onto a roaring lion ravening the prey, because that's what they were doing. They were going about taking advantage of the people by fating themselves to be men of the Lord. All right, and that's how they would devour souls. They would take, gifts. They were basically corrupt. Okay. It says here, and have made many widows in the midst thereof. And you can imagine a case like some of the examples that were mentioned above about them carrying tales to shed blood. Okay, them shedding blood for a gift. Verse 26, her priests have violated my law. And the priests were the ones that were supposed to know the law in and out, the practices, the things that the Lord required. And yet they were violating the laws of the Lord. And have profaned my holy things, and have put no difference between the holy and the profane. Okay, so because there are certain things that the Lord has set apart as holy, certain other things are profane. They're not supposed to be, mixed in between. You deal separately with certain things. Like the priests were supposed to move in a certain way when they were performing a sacrifice, who was allowed in a certain area, how things were to be handled. But as the Lord is saying here, they put no difference between the holy and the profane. They treated it all the same, with no regard. Neither have they shewed difference between the unclean and the clean, and have hid their eyes from my Sabbaths, and I am profaned among them, meaning that they didn't honor the ways that the Lord set. When it comes to the Sabbath, they acted as though, it's whatever. None of them stood up and said, hey, it's the Sabbath today. We ain't supposed to be doing this, that, and the third. That's why the Lord said, I am profane among them. Meaning that as where they would, proclaim the works of the Lord, they've completely disregarded it. Like tainted the ways that the Lord gave us. Verse 27, her princes in the midst thereof are like wolves ravening the prey. So you had the prophets conspiring, taking advantage of the people. You had the priests that were profane, putting no difference between the clean and the unclean, the holy and the profane. And then you had the princes, the rulers in the land, right, that were like wolves ravening the prey to shed blood because they had the power to. So if they didn't, if they didn't like somebody or whatever the case is, something happened, guess what? They had the power to say, oh, take this guy out. Right? And to destroy souls, to get dishonest gain. You would have certain cases where maybe you would have a matter where somebody is being judged unrighteously because the prince or the ruler might have, like it says, gained dishonest gain. They might have been bribed or received a gift or whatever it is. So there wasn't righteous judgment going forth. It was just every man doing whatever they wanted that would benefit them all throughout the land, just like you see today. That's why whenever we come out and we call out these things, people get so angry. They feel like, oh, you guys are hate. You're just mad at this and that. Guess what? That's because the land is so corrupt and polluted that when you mention righteousness, they hate you. It tells you that in Amos 5, they hate him that rebuketh in the gate and abhor him that speaketh uprightly. So this is what was going on in the land. Verse 28, and her prophets have daubed them with untempered mortar, meaning the wickedness that was being pushed and done by these princes and the priests and so on and so forth. These false prophets would basically come and reassure and reinforce that with their vain and lies and visions. Oh yeah, no, he's right. The Lord did say, yes, follow him. That he's the one the Lord is appointed to do this, that, and the third. Come and give him this, do that. That's how they daubed it with that untempered mortar. To support the wall, to try and hold it up with lies and deceit. As it says, seeing vanity and divining lies onto them. They would use that to deceive the people. And they would work one with another. That's a part of them conspiring. Saying, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, when the Lord hath not spoken. The people of the land have used oppression and exercised robbery, and have vexed the poor and the needy. Yea, they have oppressed the stranger wrongfully. And I sought for a man among them that should make up the hedge, and stand in the gap before me for the land, that I should not destroy it, but I found none. Meaning that this man that should make up the hedge, meaning that like in the physical sense, if there was a hole or a crack or whatever in the wall, you would seal it up to keep it firm, right? To stand in the gap, to fill up any spaces in there. Metaphorically, right? The way this would happen is by righteousness. A righteous man who could try to instill righteousness in the land to fill up those gaps. But the Lord said, and if the Lord was to find that, he would have a reason not to destroy it, a reason to have mercy. But as he says, I found none, because they were all pretty much just gone. Verse 31, therefore have I poured out mine indignation upon them. I have consumed them with the fire of my wrath. Their own way have I recompensed upon their heads, saith the Lord Yahweh. And he's speaking this way because the Lord has already pronounced the judgment. And it's just a matter of time before it now takes place and takes hold upon them. But he's telling Ezekiel, look, I'm doing this because of them. Look at what they're doing. This is what's happening. This is what they're promoting. This is what they're doing. Hence, this is why I'm bringing this judgment upon them. So it was definitely a lot of abominable, wicked things that were going on over there. But if you want to see an example, look around you today. The kind of videos and things you see coming out today, it's the same people doing the same lawless, lewd, perverse, and wicked acts as they did back then, just in a different time period. And guess what? The Lord brought judgment back then. What do you think he's going to do this time? Anyway, with that, I'm going to end it here. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha Kodesh. And until next time, Shalom.